Victoria Langford 3 Setup and Disruption, Scene 1, Return to the Bahamas. The sail from Turks and Caicos to the Bahamas was smooth. Clear skies, calm waters, and enough wind to keep the yacht gliding easily across the blue expanse. Victoria and Ethan worked in rhythm, no need for verbal check-ins, no surprises. She had trained him well, which was the problem. The farther they sailed from other people, the more Ethan noticed her. Not just as captain, as a woman. He found excuses to linger when she walked past, picked up dropped items before she could bend down, made her coffee unasked. Once, he brushed her fingers when handing her a weather update, long enough to notice, not long enough to comment. Victoria never reacted, never encouraged. But she noticed. She changed into long-sleeved linen, wore sunglasses longer than necessary, cut conversations short the moment they turned even slightly personal. One afternoon, as they ate lunch in companionable silence, Ethan cracked a smile. You know, this whole isolation with an elegant older woman thing, it's kind of dangerous. Victoria didn't look up. Go study your review of literature. He laughed gently. That wasn't a no. She set her fork down with surgical precision. Ethan, he straightened instinctively, you're one inappropriate comment away from being assigned an early bedtime with sentence work. Yes, ma'am. She didn't smile, but the corner of her mouth curled just enough to keep him guessing. They had 2 days left to sail, and Victoria planned to keep her lanes clear the entire way. That evening, just after the sun slipped below the horizon, Victoria stood at the wheel while Ethan coiled the main sheet neatly at her side. Ethan, she said without turning, what are you learning from this experience? Not your review of lit, your other experience. He blinked. Other experience? Life experience, she said. Real pressure, real silence. What did you think about during that big storm? Ethan looked out over the water, remembering the roar of wind, the sting of salt spray, the panic, and her naked body silhouetted in lightning as she hauled him aboard. He swallowed. I wasn't ready. That I'd fail you. That I'd fail us both. Victoria nodded slowly. And now, he said quietly, I want to be someone who doesn't flinch, someone you'd choose again. She didn't answer right away, just shifted her weight and said, good, then keep learning. She left him alone at the stern, the stars flickering above. But just as she stepped below deck, she paused, one hand on the hatch. Ethan, he turned. Her voice was calm, but sharpened to precision. Don't confuse my silence for softness. You're learning. That's all. He nodded, but the words burned. She disappeared below, and Ethan stood there, heart thudding, not from her warning, but from the fact that it still mattered so damn much. The next night, just past twilight, Victoria's voice cut through the quiet hum of the sea. Ethan, why are the running lights not on? Don't get slipshod now. He scrambled to switch them on. Yes, ma'am, sorry. Victoria adjusted a line, then said without looking at him, did I mention why we're going back to the Bahamas? Ethan straightened. No. May I ask why? We're interviewing another student, she said simply. This one is different. Ethan froze. Until a minute ago, he'd thought he was the choice, the only one. His stomach tightened. The idea of another person on board, another student, wasn't just unexpected. It was personal. He liked their rhythm. He liked solitude, liked her. And now the idea of losing what he had, losing her attention, her presence, her approval, dried his throat. He wasn't just beginning to admire Victoria Langford. He was beginning to love her. Ethan, her voice came again, softer now, almost curious. Are you beginning to have feelings? He hesitated. Then, not beginning. That was a long time ago. She leaned close, closer than she ever had before. He could feel the warmth of her breath, the gravity of her presence. His lungs forgot how to work. Tell me more, she whispered. Tell me all you know. He opened his mouth to respond, the words forming, honest, raw, and then he fell out of the bunk and hit the floor with a dull thud. He woke up, tangled in sheets, heart racing, still alone. Just a dream. But it felt more real than anything he'd ever said aloud. Ethan blinked into the dim stateroom, his breath still shaky. For a split second, panic flared in his chest. Had he? Was this like the first week? He yanked the sheet away and checked. Dry. Thank God. His pulse slowed, but his thoughts didn't. Not even close. The dream had gotten to him. Not just the kiss or the breath or the warmth, but the way she asked him to speak. Tell me all you know. It was exactly what he wanted, but also the one thing he couldn't risk. Up on deck, Victoria stared into the wind as it shifted over the bow. The stars were sharp tonight, clear, unblinking. She breathed them in. She had felt Ethan watching her again, felt the tremor in his silence. He was trying so hard not to reach, but that only made the weight of his restraint more obvious. She respected that, even admired it, but it was also dangerous. She couldn't afford to be seen as anything but his captain right now. Not when Rowan was coming aboard. Not when the balance of control was already shifting beneath the surface. Ethan didn't know it yet, but he was nearing a point of no return. And she couldn't protect him from what came next. He'd either adapt or break. She exhaled slowly and turned back toward the hatch. Time to finish the plan. The winds wouldn't wait. But she couldn't lie to herself either. For 3 nights in a row, she dreamed of Ethan. Not abstractly, not innocently. In those dreams, he touched her the way no one had in years, spoke her name like it meant more than authority, and she let him, leaned into it. This morning, she'd woken with a moan still trembling on her lips. She was glad he was on the forward deck. She wasn't ready to look him in the eye just yet. Get him out of your mind, Victoria, she told herself. She was his skipper, his mentor, his tutor, not his lover, not yet. The next morning, just after Ethan fumbled through a set of knots too quickly, she caught him staring again. Ethan, I see you watching me. He blinked. Ma'am, 100 sentences, she said evenly, explaining why you should not be lusting after me. And then 10 sentences of why you do look at me. Ethan smiled. It had to be a dream, a wonderful dream. He was wrong. And when you're done with your sentences, you will come into the main cabin and recite those 10 reasons to me. If I can't break you with chores, I'll break you with embarrassment. 30 minutes, max. Get to work. Ethan sat cross-legged in the forward berth, notebook balanced on his knee, pencil clenched between his teeth. The first few lines were easy, obvious, almost performative. But the more he wrote, the more each sentence felt like a confession. He wasn't just lusting. He admired her, respected her, feared her sometimes. And under all that structure and command, he wanted her, with a focus that bordered on devotional. At the 30-minute mark, he walked into the main cabin with the page folded twice, sweat prickling behind his neck. Victoria sat at the dining table, tablet in hand. She didn't look up. Ready? She asked. No, he said honestly. But I'm here. She set the tablet aside and gestured. Proceed. He unfolded the page with a shaky hand. 10 reasons I look at you, he said. His voice steadied as he read. 1. Because you make silence feel like conversation. 2. Because your competence is beautiful. 3. Because when you correct me, I don't feel small, I feel shaped. 4. Because I've never seen someone command space like you do. 5. Because I forget how to breathe when you lean over the chart table. 6. Because your presence calibrates mine. 7. Because I want to be worthy of your notice. 8. Because I remember how you looked in the storm. 9. Because you know how to listen when I haven't spoken. 10. Because I'm falling for you, even when I know I shouldn't. He lowered the page, didn't look at her. Victoria said nothing. The silence stretched, long enough that Ethan finally dared to glance up. Her expression was unreadable. She folded the paper, tucked it into her tablet case, and finally said, Back on deck, sailor. That wind won't watch itself. He moved, wordless, into the fading morning light. A few minutes later, the hatch opened behind him. Ethan, Victoria called, stepping onto the deck. Her voice wasn't sharp this time, it was inquisitive. He turned. You've fallen for me, she asked, quietly but directly. Explain. Ethan blinked, surprised she'd followed up. He swallowed hard. I don't know when it started, but yes, I admire you, I respect you, and I've never been around someone who makes me feel this aware of everything. She studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. Well, you probably won't be very happy with me after you see the next contestant. His stomach dropped. We make shore in 1 hour, then I'll be heading to the airport to pick her up. Clean up your crew cabin, you'll have company tonight. We have the XO cabin, which neither of you currently deserve, and we have the crew cabin with 2 bunk beds. She paused just long enough. The next student is a woman. That should lead to some interesting dynamics, don't you think? Ethan's gut twisted. A woman? In the crew quarters? Sharing the same tight space where every sigh and rustle would be heard, he nodded slowly, masking his reaction as best he could. But inside, he was spiraling. Was Victoria replacing him? Was this another test? Or was he just not enough? Below deck, Victoria stared at the galley sink without seeing it. She'd said it so easily. Bunk assignments, 2 crew beds, 1 woman, and now it hit her. She hadn't thought through the logistics when she spoke to Rowan. She hadn't realized what that kind of proximity might stir or risk. How am I going to get myself out of this problem? She asked herself silently. Command was simple when everyone had their roles, but this was going to test all of them. Scene 2. Rowan's arrival and interview. Victoria slipped off the dock just after mooring the yacht. With a practiced motion, she hoisted her small travel bag onto her shoulder and gave Ethan one last look. "Clean the crew cabin," she said. "Top to bottom. You'll have company tonight." He nodded, but his mind was reeling. As he watched her stride up the pier, he turned back to the galley with a pit in his stomach. A woman in the same room? He thought, how would that even work? He grabbed the mop and started on the floor first, working faster than usual, as if polishing teak could scrub away confusion. Every drawer he organized, every corner he straightened only deepened the swirl of thoughts. Meanwhile, at the airport, Victoria walked briskly through arrivals. She spotted a tall, lean figure in a sharp linen dress waving confidently from behind a column. "Rowan Ellery," Victoria said, extending a hand. Rowan grinned and pulled her into a half-hug instead. "It's been too long." They walked side by side toward the parking lot, the heat pressing down like a silent observer. Victoria glanced sideways. "Ready for the interview, always," Rowan replied, eyes calm and unreadable. Victoria's tone shifted. "Then let's begin." Rowan crossed one leg over the other as they settled into the car, the engine purring to life. "So," Victoria said, steering into traffic, "remind me what you're researching, in your own words." Rowan adjusted her sunglasses. "Behavioral psychology, specifically the role of authority and ambiguity in voluntary obedience. My dissertation examines how people reconcile submission with autonomy, especially in confined or hierarchically structured environments." Victoria arched her brow. "Sounds like you'll fit in just fine." Rowan smirked. "That's the hope." They drove in silence for a few moments, the weight of mutual intellect thick in the air. Then Victoria cleared her throat. "I need to confess a logistical oversight." Rowan turned her head. "Oh? We have a crew cabin with 2 bunks. The XO quarters haven't been assigned, and I don't believe either of you has earned them yet." "And you'll be sharing that crew cabin with a male student," Victoria said. "Temporarily. Does that present a problem?" Rowan didn't blink. "No, ma'am. I can adapt." Back at the yacht, the sun was beginning to tip toward the horizon when Victoria led Rowan aboard. Ethan stood at attention on the deck, freshly showered, freshly anxious. "Ethan Rivera, meet Dr. Rowan Ellery," Victoria said smoothly. "Rowan, this is Ethan. He'll be giving you the tour while I pick up provisions." Rowan extended her hand. "Nice to meet you, Ethan." Ethan hesitated just a half-second before taking it. "Likewise." Victoria disappeared down the dock before either of them could add more. Ethan cleared his throat. "Let me show you around." He led her through the cabins, the galley, and the compact head, reciting facts that barely touched his own thoughts. Rowan listened politely, nodding at all the right times. When they reached the shaded rear of the upper deck, he paused. "So," Rowan said, leaning on the railing, "how's life on the sea treating you?" "Different than I expected," Ethan admitted. "It's quieter, harder, more personal than I thought." Rowan nodded. "Victoria hasn't changed. You knew her before?" "I took one of her undergrad seminars at Columbia. She doesn't forget a good student or a challenge." They shared a smile, cautious but familiar. After a pause, Ethan exhaled. "We should talk." "About? Us, then. Now." Rowan nodded slowly. "I wondered if we would." The tension finally broke, not with resolution but recognition, and for the first time since she stepped aboard, Ethan felt like this voyage was going to change more than just his academic record. Victoria returned just as the sun dipped below the edge of the dock. She walked up the gangway carrying a bag of fruit and vegetables and paused mid-step, watching Rowan and Ethan talk, relaxed and leaning together along the port rail. She cleared her throat. "Are you two okay with sharing a room for a couple of days?" Ethan stepped away instinctively. "Excuse me, ma'am. Rowan and I dated in college a while back." Victoria raised both eyebrows. Oh my, that complicates things, doesn't it? There wasn't any violence or law-breaking involved, right?" No, Ethan said quickly. No law breaking. Victoria nodded once. You two will be able to work it out. We'll be on this boat for several months. If this is an issue, I need to know before we leave port. Rowan held Victoria's gaze evenly. It ended on mutual terms, she said. There was no drama, just timing, grad school, too many directions. It wasn't bitter. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Still, close quarters, shared sleep, academic pressure. I can handle myself, ma'am, Rowan said, and I know how to keep things professional. Victoria studied her for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. All right, that's good enough for me, for now. Rowan ducked into the crew quarters to begin unpacking, folding her garments into the narrow drawers and adjusting to the tightness of the shared space. Meanwhile, Ethan chopped vegetables with focused intensity in the galley, trying to push back the thrum of nerves behind his sternum. A few minutes later, Victoria stepped into the crew cabin, watching Rowan move with precise, almost military neatness. Getting settled, Rowan glanced up. Yes, ma'am. Everything fits. Victoria nodded once, then leaned casually against the doorframe. You're smart, Rowan. You already know this boat is my world, but I'll spell it out. Safety comes first. Academic study comes second. Everything else, discomfort, awkwardness, even relationships, comes last. Rowan straightened, attentive. Victoria continued. Until someone earns the EXO stateroom, you and Ethan will study in the main cabin. Shared quarters, shared burden. If either of you slip, I'll see it and correct it. I rule with an iron fist, Rowan. I am the skipper, and my commands are not suggestions. Understand, Rowan's voice was calm. Yes, ma'am, perfectly. Scene 3, first night sharing quarters. Dinner that evening was simple. Spiced lentils over rice with a splash of citrus and garlic, Ethan's nervous energy translating into precision cuts and focused movement. Rowan took a seat at the table first. Victoria arrived last, her expression unreadable as she scanned both students. They ate mostly in silence, the occasional clink of silverware, the only sound beyond the subtle creak of the moored yacht. Afterward, Victoria pushed back her chair. 90 minutes of study. Main cabin. I'll be reviewing your logs tomorrow morning. Both nodded. Rowan rose first, clearing her dishes. Ethan followed silently. They took their places at the main table, laptops and notebooks spread wide as the first hints of night pooled outside the portholes. At exactly 89 minutes in, Victoria reappeared beside them. We sail on the tide tomorrow, she said crisply. Let's get this elephant out of the room right now. Bed. Both of you. Right now. No talking. Good night. They exchanged quick glances, nothing overt, but enough to acknowledge the weight of the situation. Rowan ducked into the crew quarters first. Ethan followed, head low, suddenly aware of how small the space felt with two people in it. She climbed into the lower bunk without ceremony, facing the wall. Ethan grabbed his toothbrush and moved to the head. When he returned, he took the upper bunk, barely making a sound. For a long moment, they lay in silence, listening to the gentle lapping of water against the hull. Ethan's mind refused to rest. The rhythm of her breath below him, the curve of her shoulder when she'd leaned against the rail earlier, the easy, competent way she unpacked. He rolled onto his back, staring at the ceiling. What are you doing? You have feelings for Victoria. You're on a boat with your ex, and you're sleeping 6 feet above her. Real smart, Rivera. Below, Rowan blinked in the dim light, watching shadows move on the wall. He's changed, she thought, but not completely. Still earnest, still trying too hard, but he was trying. She smiled to herself and closed her eyes. Neither of them spoke, and sleep took its time coming. The sound of each other's movements, shifts in the mattress, the creak of slats, the quiet huff of breath, only made it worse. Ethan could hear her inhale slowly, then exhale with equal control. She turned once, then again. Sheets rustled, silence pressed in between each motion. Rowan, for her part, heard Ethan roll over for the 5th time. His breathing wasn't heavy, just deliberate, like he was trying to pretend he was asleep. Neither wanted to speak. Neither could rest. Tension wasn't loud. It was intimate, inescapable, and it filled every inch of the narrow cabin like heat from a rising storm. Rowan turned again, this time more sharply. Her elbow thudded against the wall, followed by a whispered curse. Ethan shifted at the sound. You okay? He whispered too quickly. Fine, came the clipped reply. He waited. Sorry, he added after a beat, unsure what for. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It pulsed. Rowan exhaled through her nose. This is ridiculous. Ethan agreed, but said nothing. She turned to face the bunk above her. Are you breathing that loudly on purpose? Ethan bristled. What? No, sorry. Then breathe less smugly, she muttered. A pause. Then both of them, despite themselves, laughed, softly, tiredly, like it didn't fix anything, but released just enough pressure to get them through the next hour. The moment passed, but the storm inside the cabin hadn't. It was only biding time. Act 2, Rising Tension and Complication Scene 4, Morning Reflections and Debrief. Morning crept into the cabin with the slow, golden persistence of sunlight through canvas. Ethan stirred first, blinking against the soft glow and realizing he was still turned toward the edge of the bunk. Below him, Rowan shifted. They both froze. He waited. She didn't move. He started, then stopped. I'm not getting out until you're out, Rowan said flatly. Why? Because it's daylight, she said, and I'm not climbing out in full view with you hovering like a human periscope. I'm not a periscope, Ethan muttered. Besides, I could say the same. Silence. He sat up. Okay, on 3, no peeking, she warned. I won't if you won't. Another beat. Fine, she said. On 3. 1, 2. They both hesitated. 3. Ethan scrambled to the far side of the cabin, eyes squeezed shut, hands raised like a surrender. Rowan shot out of the lower bunk and darted behind the cabin curtain, swearing under her breath. Despite her speed and protective instincts, Ethan saw her, just for a second, standing with her back to him. The outline of her bare shoulders, her spine tapering to hips framed in simple white panties, imprinted itself on his mind before he could look away. He hadn't meant to see it. But now that he had, he couldn't unsee it. And he wasn't proud of the fact that part of him didn't want to. Unbeknownst to him, Rowan had gotten a longer view. When she'd turned toward the curtain, Ethan had still been mid-move, standing fully naked in profile. Then turning, just slightly too late. She saw all of him, front to back, and she knew he didn't know it. If he had, he'd be blushing to death right now. The image was burned into her brain, not just the shape of him, but the unguarded way he stood, completely unaware, completely real. She wasn't sure she'd ever be able to unsee it, and she wasn't sure she wanted to. From the galley, Victoria's voice floated down. Breakfast in 10. You two better not be making a scene. They said nothing, but the tension between them had found a new flavor, something charged and crackling, just beneath the skin. Over breakfast, Victoria stirred her tea calmly and said, We sail on the tide at noon. Ethan, check the tide tables and ensure that I am right. That gives us 4 hours together. Let's begin with you telling me what you learned by sharing a cabin together. She looked to Rowan first. You're the newest. Begin. Rowan set her fork down slowly, carefully. Yes, ma'am, she said. I learned that tight quarters strip away performance. There's no room for pretense. Not physically, not emotionally. Victoria's expression didn't change, so Rowan continued. I learned that even unresolved history isn't as disruptive as unspoken expectations. Ethan and I, she glanced at him briefly, we had distance, but no closure. Now we have honesty, if nothing else. She straightened in her seat. And I learned that command, even implied, creates friction when it's unbalanced. We are both trained to follow rules, but no rulebook prepares you for sharing silence with someone who knows too much of your past and nothing of your future. Then she picked up her fork and added, Also, I learned Ethan talks in his sleep. Victoria arched a brow, letting her spoon rest in her tea. What did Ethan say in his sleep? Rowan lifted her eyes, cool but faintly amused. Nothing incriminating, mostly murmurs, my name once, and yours. Victoria's lips twitched, but she didn't smile. Well then, she said, I suppose we should be thankful for discretion, conscious or not. Rowan dared to look at Ethan and said, And the sunrise was surprisingly beautiful. I got an eyeful of a magnificent dawn, sun rising in the east. I shall remember it always. Ethan choked slightly on his orange juice. Victoria caught the gist of that comment, not sure that Ethan had. She had to confess that she was just a little jealous of Rowan for that view, but she couldn't let the comment pass without some chastisement. She set down her teacup with deliberate care, then arched a brow at Rowan. Let's keep our poetic metaphors shipshape, Dr. Ellery. Observational logs are one thing. Moon-eyed commentary on your bunkmates' horizon is another. She cataloged the comment for future reflection, but for now, she let it pass without further correction. She turned her gaze toward Ethan, her tone light but edged. And Ethan, What did you learn from sharing a cabin, other than you saying our names in your dreams? Ethan cleared his throat and looked down at his hands. I learned that the past doesn't stay packed away just because you've moved on. Rowan and I never really finished what we started or ended, and being in the same space again brought all of that forward. He glanced at Rowan, then back at Victoria. I also learned that tension doesn't always mean conflict. Sometimes it just means two people are still figuring out who they are to each other. Victoria watched him, silent. Ethan added, and I learned that Rowan's elbow is sharper than it looks. Rowan smirked. You rolled over too loudly. He gave a small, defeated shrug. Fair. Victoria looked at Rowan for a moment longer, then asked, and how does it feel, being in your late 20s, a PhD in hand, and still being told when to go to bed? Rowan gave the faintest smile. It feels like structure, ma'am, and honestly, not the worst thing in the world. Victoria nodded once, satisfied with the answer. Then she turned her attention to Ethan. And you, Mr. Rivera? How does it feel to be barely 20, halfway through a graduate program, and still getting ordered to bed like a cabin boy? Ethan blinked, then gave a half smile. Honestly, less humiliating than it should be. Structure's good, especially when the person giving orders knows exactly what they're doing. Victoria's brow lifted, but she said nothing. Just logged the answer. Tone, content, delivery. She set her teacup down with a subtle click and looked at them both. And students, how does it feel when I critique, criticize, correct, nay, punish you in front of your peer? Honesty is expected, demanded. Ethan didn't hesitate. It's brutal, he said, voice even, but it keeps me honest. When I get corrected in front of Rowan, I know you're not playing favorites. You're holding a standard, and we're either up to it or we're not. Rowan took a moment longer. Ethan had set the tone, measured, respectful, and aligned, and that narrowed her options. She stirred her tea once, watching the surface settle before answering. I believe in rigor, she said, and I don't mind criticism when it's earned. She glanced sideways at Ethan, but there's a line between accountability and theater. I haven't decided yet which side of that line you operate on. She looked back at Victoria, steady. But I'm still here, so maybe that says enough. Victoria did not smile. No, she said plainly, it doesn't. She pushed her tea slightly aside, voice sharpened to the edge of command. You mentioned theater. Let's clarify that. What exactly did you mean by that term, Dr. Ellery? She leaned forward just enough. Do you believe what's happening aboard this vessel is for show? Do you doubt, even for a second, that this voyage is anything but real? The pause that followed was not rhetorical. It demanded something. Anything. Clarification, retraction, or bold honesty. Victoria's eyes held Rowan's like a storm just before it breaks. Rowan lifted her chin slightly. I meant what I said, ma'am, she said. There are moments when correction feels performative. You know your authority. We feel it. But sometimes it feels like you sharpen the knife just to watch us flinch. She paused, her voice even. But that's only a feeling, not a judgment, and I suspect you already know where the line is. I'm still learning how to read it. She glanced down, then back up. But if it matters, this doesn't feel like theater. It feels like something I signed up for, and something I want to survive. Victoria heard every word and every hesitation. Luckily, she gave a good answer, because she could come up with a dozen corrections on Rowan's second day aboard if needed. But she wasn't smiling. Not yet. Her voice came quieter now, but firmer. Ellery, I'm telling you plainly, you've just found my line in the sand. It's not subtle. It's painted in red with arrows pointing to it from every direction. She straightened slightly, gaze unwavering. If you ever imply again that what I do out here is performative, I will show you, on principle, how deeply untheatrical my correction can be. Victoria pushed her chair back and stood, brushing a stray thread from her sleeve. Good. Now that your confessions are complete, we have a vessel to ready. She crossed to the galley hatch and glanced at them both. Stow gear, secure lines, clear the chart table. We sail at noon, and I want nothing left to chance. Both Ethan and Rowan rose quickly, the mood shifting from personal to purposeful in a blink. Above deck, the harbor buzzed with low activity, dinghies crisscrossing, radios crackling in the distance. The sun was higher now, warm and full. Below, Ethan checked the nav station while Rowan resecured her bunk. Neither spoke much, their earlier tensions smoothed over by shared duty. But as Rowan passed him, Ethan paused. "Hey," he said, just loud enough to stop her. "That thing you said at breakfast about theater, that wasn't the best way to handle Victoria." Rowan raised an eyebrow, cautious. Ethan continued, "She's tough, yeah, but she's not fake. She's not putting on a show. If you're going to question her style, you'd better have something airtight to back it up." He hesitated, then added, "You're brilliant. I get that. You walk into a room like you already know how the next 5 minutes are going to play out. But maybe a little humble pie wouldn't hurt either. Just enough to show her you're here to learn, not just to evaluate." Rowan stood still for a moment longer, then folded her arms. "You might be right," she said. "But where I come from, you learn to question power, not just accept it. I wasn't trying to provoke her. I was trying to see where the edge is." She exhaled slowly. "Turns out, I found it. Painted in red, arrows and all." She gave Ethan a brief look, grudging but not hostile. "Thanks for the honesty." Ethan almost walked away, but then glanced back over his shoulder, voice lower. "You know, last week I got in so much trouble. Victoria made me work shirtless, in my underwear, barefoot, all day. Cleaning, sanding, hauling, everything. Then she sent me to bed at 1800 hours like a 6-year-old. He half grinned. "The skipper has lots of interesting educational methods." Rowan tilted her head. "And did you learn from that particular method?" Ethan chuckled softly. "Oh, absolutely. That mistake won't happen again. Ever. Trust me, once you've spent an entire day barefoot and blushing, the lesson sticks." Victoria stood on deck, clipboard in hand, making final checks. Her voice rang out sharp and clear. "Ethan, double-check the fuel condition. Rowan, confirm the fresh water levels." They moved without protest. At 11:52, Victoria gave one final sweep of the rigging, then nodded. "Everyone on deck. Let's do this right." Scene 5. Storm Trial. They sailed into the day, the yacht cutting cleanly through rolling blue. The wind was steady, the sky clear, and spirits were high as the coastline slipped behind them. But by late afternoon, the clouds had thickened into a gray ceiling. Wind rose with a whistle, and waves began to slap against the hull with force. A fresh breeze, Victoria had called it, 17 to 21 knots. Manageable, but serious. Whitecaps crested all around them. The waves rolled in at 6 feet. Ethan held firm at the bowline, water misting his face, and Victoria stood calm behind the wheel, her body a study in focus and control. Rowan, meanwhile, gripped the handrail with whitening knuckles. She tried to hide it at first, but a sudden lurch of the boat gave her away. "Permission to go below," she croaked. "Granted," Victoria said without turning. Rowan disappeared below deck. Ethan glanced toward the hatch. "Ma'am, permission to check on her?" Victoria nodded. "I'll monitor autopilot." Ethan slipped below and found Rowan curled near the head, vomiting into the small metal sink. She retched again, and Ethan, without thinking, knelt beside her and gently pulled her hair back. She groaned and tried to wave him off, but he stayed, silent, steady, calm. Between dry heaves, he rinsed a cloth and wiped her face. Got her a bottle of water, brushed strands of sweat-matted hair from her temple. The next hour repeated that way. Retch, wipe, comfort, repeat. He never left her side. When Victoria finally came down to check, Rowan was pale and trembling, collapsed against the wall of the head. "She's done," Ethan said softly. "Nothing left to give." Victoria knelt beside her, checked her forehead, then turned to Ethan. "She'll need rest, comfort." "May I move her to the XO stateroom?" he asked. "It's closer to the center of the boat. It'll ride steadier." Victoria paused. "That's not your call. I haven't named XO for the week." "I know," Ethan said. "But comfort first. We can figure the rest later." Victoria looked at him carefully. "You've been holding her hair back." "Yes, ma'am." She studied him for another beat, then nodded. "Your actions will be remembered, positively." She stood, then added more quietly, "Help her move, gently." Ethan nodded once and turned back to Rowan with patient hands. Victoria stepped away, feeling the tension in her chest loosen, not from the storm, but from the realization that Ethan Rivera had just passed another kind of test entirely. She returned to the helm and adjusted the course slightly. The rain misted her face, but she barely felt it. Her thoughts remained below, with Ethan and Rowan. She was glad the rain had picked up. It masked the tears threading quietly down her cheeks, tears she could never shed in front of the crew. Not when command was everything. But for just a moment, something unexpected had pierced through. She had envied Rowan, not for her intellect or her poise, but for Ethan's presence, for his quiet care. For the gentleness of that hand, pulling back hair, the steadiness of a cloth against skin. It was absurd, she told herself. Rowan had been sick, genuinely miserable, and yet Victoria would have traded places, just for a moment, to be touched by someone who wasn't performing, who wasn't afraid. "Victoria," she whispered aloud, lost in wind and spray, "what's gotten into you?" She closed her eyes briefly. "Stop that kind of thinking. If you think it, he will know." She gripped the wheel tighter, grounding herself in the helm, but the truth was unshakable. She was slowly, inexorably falling for Ethan Rivera. What she saw shook her more than the wind. Ethan hadn't hesitated. No theatrics, no need for praise, just calm, steady action, holding Rowan's hair, fetching water, speaking only when needed. He'd prioritized her comfort, her dignity. That wasn't something she had taught him. It was something she respected deeply. Victoria knew what it meant to lead by command, but she also knew the quiet power of service, the kind that came without expectation. Ethan had shown that, not for her approval, just because it was right. He hadn't even asked if Victoria was watching. That humility, that awareness, was rare. She felt it click into place, like a knot pulled tight and clean. He might be ready, she thought. Not just for the sea, for more. Supplemental log entries, Scene 6 end. Trainee observation log, Ethan Rivera. Timestamp 0530 hours, location, at sea, following moderate storm conditions. Log entry, required, personal reflection, subject peer response, under pressure. During last night's weather event, Dr. Rowan Ellery experienced acute physical distress, seasickness, dehydration, disorientation. I initiated voluntary aid protocol, maintained presence, supported subject without compromising dignity or agency. Key observations. Dr. Ellery did not resist assistance beyond initial instinctive gestures. No verbal acknowledgement was requested or expected. Comfort provided without expectation of reciprocation. Personal conclusion. This experience clarified prior emotional ambiguities. Dr. Ellery is a capable peer, but no longer occupies a conceptual or emotional what-if space. My focus, loyalty, and internal calibration remain aligned with Captain Langford's expectations and presence aboard. This incident only reinforced that clarity. ER Trainee Observation Log, Dr. Rowan Ellery. Timestamp 0600 hours, location XO cabin, temporary reassignment. Log entry required. Personal reflection. Subject, psychological integrity post-distress. Acute seasickness rendered me temporarily incapacitated. Trainee Rivera assumed caretaker role. His demeanor was professional, composed, and notably devoid of self-aggrandizing behaviors often present in male counterparts under such circumstances. Key observations. Rivera demonstrated adaptive empathy, no emotional probing or overstepping, maintained silence and situational awareness. Personal conclusion. Rivera has matured beyond the intellectually ambitious but emotionally reactive student I once knew. I observed zero signaling behavior. He acted out of care, not calculation. No romantic tension was present, only a mutual recognition of personhood under duress. Assessment. His trajectory shows promise for leadership, possibly more than I gave credit for. Victoria's note. Empathy under pressure, discipline in silence. These logs say more about who they are now than anything I've witnessed above deck. VL Scene 6. Rebalancing the trio. Rowan had mostly recovered, and Victoria wasted no time testing the new dynamic. The morning assignments came clipped and fast. Rowan, take over systems calibration. Ethan, rerun the electrical checks. It was subtle, but Ethan felt it. Systems calibration had been his routine, his pride. Now it was hers. He said nothing, just nodded. But the knot in his chest tightened. When Rowan asked a clarifying question and got a sharp reply from Victoria, "Use your head, not just your degree," Ethan winced. But when he accidentally misread a voltage value and called it out wrong, Victoria turned on him fast. "That's twice this week, Rivera," she snapped. "If you can't trust your own eyes, maybe you're not ready to lead anything yet." Rowan looked away. Ethan froze, throat tightening. The criticism wasn't about the voltage, it was something else. Something heavier. Victoria took a breath. "Rowan, I'm assigning you interim XO duty until further notice. Ethan, return to your pre-review coursework. I'll expect your updated logs tonight." It landed like a slap. Ethan said nothing, just nodded once and turned to go below. When he reached his berth, he opened his binder and stared at it without blinking. A minute later, he tapped gently on the galley door. Ma'am, he said quietly, permission to begin my academic review early. I'd like to get ahead while I recalibrate. Victoria, still standing by the chart table, blinked. Her face gave away nothing, but her hand rested lightly against the table's edge. Granted, she said. Her voice was even. Ethan left without another word. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, Victoria walked quietly into the crew cabin. Ethan was sitting cross-legged, notebooks open, eyes focused but a bit too still. She said nothing, just crossed to him, knelt slightly to his level, and met his gaze. For a long, still moment, she didn't speak, just looked into his eyes, long enough for him to feel it, to really feel it. Limbic resonance, she didn't need words. Her eyes said everything. I overstepped. I made it worse. I hurt you, and I'm trying to figure out why. Ethan held the gaze, not angry, not smug, just present. Just seeing her, and he nodded once. Small, but he understood. Then, bravely and without asking permission, he reached out and squeezed her hand, tightly, just for a second, a single, steady pulse of connection. And then he let go. Victoria looked angry, jaw set, eyes narrowed, ready to snap at his insolence. But then she saw his face, that earnest, open, puppy dog expression, filled not with defiance, but her shoulders softened, one tear slid down her cheek. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak, but in that tear, he saw a million messages, 1,000 things she couldn't say. He smiled, just a little, then bent back to his work. Victoria stood, left just as silently. Sometime later, Ethan was coughing up seawater. It burned in his lungs, the pressure crushing his chest as the wave rolled over him and dragged him under. Disoriented and gasping, he barely registered the hands hauling him out until he was flat on the deck. Victoria, she dropped to her knees, already starting compressions. He wasn't moving. No, you can't die, she said, breathless, panicked. Oh my God, don't take him. Not now. I need him so much. He completes me. Not since Nate have I needed a man this much. She tilted his head, gave 2 breaths, pressed again. I love him. Please, bring him back. And then Ethan fell off the bunk with a thud. He jolted awake, heart pounding, chest heaving, sticky warmth. He threw back the sheet. No, not again, he whispered, horrified. Please, I've got to clean this up before they see me. Footsteps. Deck shoes. Come. Oh no, she can't see me like this. Please. But it was Rowan. She stepped into the room, took one look, and gasped, then saw his face. The shame. The wet eyes, the helplessness. She knelt, folding her legs under her, and began gathering the sheets without a word. Then, gently, she leaned in and kissed his forehead. Don't worry, baby. I understand. It's okay. I won't pick on you about this. He sat up, shaking, relieved. You held my hair back when I was sick, she said softly. Let me help you. He wrapped his arms around her neck and let the emotion pour out. She held him a moment, then got up, sheets in hand. At the door, she turned, looked at him, and cupped his chin. That's the hottest thing a guy can do, she said with a crooked smile. I have to leave. Damn, I don't trust myself right now. Damn. Scene 7. Morning confession. Morning came gentle and clean. The storm had passed, the seas were steady, and the air smelled faintly of citrus and salt. Rowan was already up forward, barefoot in the galley, humming faintly as she cracked eggs into a warm skillet. Ethan stood outside Victoria's cabin, knuckles hovering for a second before he knocked. A pause. Then her voice. Come in. He stepped inside, posture tight. Can I talk to you, Captain? Victoria nodded once, closing the tablet in her lap. You've got the deck. Ethan hesitated for only a breath. I had this dream last night, he said. I don't know how to process it. I couldn't sleep after. I need you to know because it might affect the cruise. He sat, awkward, serious, and looked her straight in the eye. Then he told her everything. The drowning. CPR. She cries to the heavens. The confession of love. Waking up soaked and ashamed. The accident. The sheets. Rowan finds him. Her reaction. He didn't leave anything out. Not the words. Not the panic. Not the forehead kiss. His voice didn't break, but it trembled. It felt like more than a dream, he finished. Like something in me was trying to break out. I didn't want to keep it from you. I don't want anything getting in the way of the work. Victoria was silent for a long moment, then said carefully, What do we do with this information, Ethan? Her tone was steady, but not cold. You're learning leadership skills and problem solving. Use them. Don't just feel this. Respond to it. What's the next step? She watched him closely, but her mind was already 2 steps ahead. Part of her wanted to dismiss the entire conversation as emotional fallout, just another student's unraveling dream. But she couldn't. Not with Ethan. Not with the look in his eyes. Victoria had heard her name in his dreams before. But this was different. This wasn't some childish fantasy or flirtation. It was raw, charged. Something deeper was stirring, something neither of them were prepared for. She had pulled that boy from the sea once already, and in his dream, he made her confess what she wouldn't dare say aloud. Was that projection or prophecy? She hated that she didn't know. She hated even more how much of her wanted it to be true. No, she reminded herself. She was the captain, the architect. She couldn't afford romantic collapse in the middle of the Atlantic. But God help her. Part of her was already tipping. She blinked once, refocusing on him, still waiting, still trusting. He deserved a calm leader, not a woman unraveling. Ethan took a slow breath. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I feel like I've wrecked something. This whole voyage is supposed to be about growth and discipline and pushing limits, and I'm down here having emotional meltdowns and dream spillovers like a schoolboy with a crush." He looked away, ashamed. "I thought I was doing better. I thought I had control. And now?" He stopped himself, then looked back at her, really looked. "No," he corrected, quieter now. "That's not fair. What I had was a moment, a real one. Maybe embarrassing, yeah, but maybe also necessary." He sat a little straighter. "I've seen what command costs. You wear it like armor, and that dream, that mess, maybe it just cracked open something I hadn't named yet." He met her eyes again. "I don't want to be a burden, but I won't lie to you. I care about you, and I'm scared of what that means. But I'll still take my orders, still earning my way. I just needed to say it, because leaders should name their shadows too." Victoria sat back slightly, her hands folded on the table. "That was honest," she said, "and vulnerable, and remarkably clear." She let that sit between them for a beat, then added, quieter, "You didn't wreck anything, Ethan. You exposed something. To me, to yourself. That's harder than it looks." Her eyes sharpened, not unkind but deliberate. "But we don't get to wallow in what-ifs at sea. You said you care about me, and I heard you. But care isn't permission. It's responsibility, and it cuts both ways." She paused. "You want to lead someday. Start here. Carry this feeling. Don't collapse under it. Don't project it. Just carry it. Show me you can. Now go. Rowan's probably already finished breakfast, and I'm not about to have the XO outpace you before noon." She paused at the door, then glanced over her shoulder with the faintest edge of dry humor. "And Ethan, do the laundry, and tell me if you need correction?" Ethan gave her a sheepish half-smile. "Honestly, might be just what I need." He stood straighter, voice steadier. "Hot day, deck scrubbing detail, just me in my underwear, watching the ladies swim off the transom." He let the image hang, then added with a shrug, "Could be the perfect reset. Clears the head, builds humility. Classic Langford corrective." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Make it so after breakfast. How long?" Ethan didn't flinch. "All day would help me get my mind right." She blinked once, then laughed. Just once, sharp and real. "All day? God loves you, boy. I was thinking 2 hours, but all day it is." She turned toward the galley. "Hey, Rowan. Ethan's got something to tell you." Rowan, already setting plates on the table, turned with a curious eyebrow raised. "Oh!" Ethan stepped into the galley, his cheeks already flushing. Before he could speak, Rowan grinned wickedly. "Maybe, if he really wants to get his mind right, he wears women's panties instead of his underwear." Victoria didn't miss a beat. "You have the makings of a fine XO, Rowan. You too? Make it so." Ethan felt like he'd been caught in a tornado, but his choices were limited. He'd gotten himself into this. What he didn't know, but would soon find out, was how this hazing brought the three of them so much closer. They hadn't been this much of a team before, and to his own quiet surprise, Ethan felt a thrill run down his spine. He was about to spend the day nearly naked in front of two women he liked, admired, maybe even loved, in different ways. The humiliation wasn't crushing, it was oddly clarifying. He was being seen, truly seen. And that was its own kind of power. Scene 8, The Rescue. The morning sun was high, the deck warm beneath Ethan's bare feet as he scrubbed along the port rail in nothing but Rowan's panties and resolve. Rowan was on the bow running lines for practice. Victoria, above at the helm, scanned the horizon out of habit more than expectation. Then she saw it. Smoke, low and trailing, a boat in trouble. She grabbed binoculars, The vessel was listing hard to port. Something was very wrong. "All hands," she called, voice sharp and cutting through the salt air. "We've got a distress situation. Ethan, get dressed and prep emergency gear. Rowan, radio a distress report and hail the Royal Bahamas Defense Force." Within seconds, the yacht snapped into motion. Ethan vanished below and returned with a PFD, already moving to load med kits and thermal blankets. Rowan had the radio in hand, voice calm but urgent. "Mayday received. Position logged. Bahamas Defense Force response in motion. ETA 35 minutes. They reached the stricken vessel within 20. Smoke curled from the engine room vents. A man and a woman were on deck, waving, panicked. The woman slumped to her knees just as they pulled alongside. Ethan boarded with the emergency bag, while Victoria took the helm and maneuvered to keep the boats aligned. Rowan tossed a line and steadied the connection. "She's not breathing," the man yelled. "Bring her over," Ethan shouted back. "Now!" The transfer was clumsy but fast. The woman was pale, soaked, and motionless. Ethan laid her flat on the Langford deck and immediately began CPR. Rowan counted compressions aloud beside him. Victoria stood by, radio in hand. Nothing. Then a cough, a sputter, water expelled. She gasped, then sobbed. Ethan sat back on his heels, shaking, soaked in sweat and seawater. "She's breathing," Rowan confirmed, breathless. Victoria spoke into the radio. "Patient recovered, conscious but weak. We're ready for extraction." 20 minutes later, the thrum of rotors filled the air. A Coast Guard helo dropped a swimmer, then a stretcher. The woman was lifted first, the man next. Then the line zipped upward and the sky quieted. Silence. The three of them stood on deck, windless, stunned. "Congratulations, crew. You just saved 2 lives," said Victoria. The helo crew radioed to see if they needed anything: water, food, suntan lotion for the guy with the rapidly growing sunburn. One of the guardsmen said, "Hey, buddy, you really should wear more than a PFD and women's panties in the Bahamas." Ethan looked down and exclaimed, "Oh, shit!" Everyone got a good laugh out of that one. Victoria, never to miss a lesson, said, "Crew, get below and journal the event and your reflections. 30 minutes and then report." No rest for the weary, Rowan thought. 30 minutes later, Victoria called them back on deck. The autopilot was holding course flawlessly and the sea had settled into a steady rhythm. Victoria stepped back from the wheel and crossed her arms. "Report," she said crisply. "Ethan, you first. Make it good." Ethan stepped forward, journal in hand. He opened it to a marked page, cleared his throat, and began to read. "Today I remembered that leadership is not about having all the answers. It's about staying present through the chaos. I was scared. I was soaked. And for a minute I thought we might lose her. But we didn't. We moved fast. We moved together. Victoria kept us aligned. Rowan's voice never shook. And when it came down to it, my training took over. I didn't think. I just acted. And she lived. We did that. All of us. It wasn't clean. It wasn't perfect. But it was enough. And for the first time since this voyage began, I feel like I belong here. Not just as a student, but as someone who can be counted on." Victoria looked at Rowan. "Report." Rowan stepped forward, her own journal in hand, flipping to the neatly flagged section. She didn't read immediately. She scanned her own words once more before beginning. "Today," she said, "I watched chaos unfold and did not panic. I saw Ethan take command of a moment I wasn't trained to handle, and I trusted him. That alone is significant." She continued, voice calm. "Victoria, your instructions were precise. Ethan, your action was fearless. I've spent most of my academic life studying the dynamics of authority, but this morning I lived inside it." She paused, then added more quietly, "There is no simulation that can prepare you for the moment when someone's life hangs in the balance, and all you have is training and instinct, and there is no greater relief than watching those things work." Victoria nodded once, then checked her watch. "An hour before lunch. Ethan, your journal could have been better. Back to scrubbing." She smirked just a little. "Don't get too sad while Rowan and I go swimming, and don't look, we might be skinny dipping." Ethan looked up, incredulous. But, I helped. I'm hot too." "You can't join us if we're skinny dipping," Victoria said, already walking aft. "Don't even watch us, buddy." He groaned and turned back to his brush. Moments later, he heard them laughing, the soft splash of 2 bodies hitting the water. He paused, glancing toward the swim deck. A wicked thought sparked. Going to bed early would be worth it. Ethan stood, walked slowly toward the swim step, and sat down on the deck. Victoria's voice rang out. Hey, you are in trouble now. Get back to work. Instead, Ethan bent over, picked up their clothing in one tidy bundle, and turned back toward the clean patch of teak he'd been scrubbing. He smiled to himself. Maybe trouble was exactly where he belonged. Behind him, there was a sudden quiet splash, followed by a gasp, not from the water, but from the girls. Victoria and Rowan looked at each other, shocked that Ethan had been bold enough to walk back and casually scoop up their clothing while they were naked in the water. Victoria muttered, "What do we do now? He's going to come back and watch us until we shrivel up like prunes." Rowan swam closer and whispered, "I have an idea, if we're brave enough." Then she murmured the rest. Victoria's eyes widened. "Are you kidding? In front of him? Do you know what you're saying?" Rowan gave her a sly, knowing look. "He's got a crush on both of us. He's a great guy, and I trust him not to take advantage. Plus, it gives me a rush to think that I'm doing this in front of a guy." Victoria groaned softly. "This is going to be a bitch to recover from." "Yeah, but it won't hurt how I feel. He's so cute, and I love to see him blush. Let's make his day, Captain." Victoria hesitated. Then finally, with a sigh and a reluctant grin, said, "Okay, when he comes back." Ethan finished the spot he was working on. He was getting hungry, and after a moment of hesitation, he walked back to the swim platform and sat down. "I'm hungry," he called. "You want me to start lunch?" Victoria turned in the water. "Not yet. Wait for a minute." And then she and Rowan started to climb out. Ethan's eyes went wide, his brain short-circuited. Two of his favorite people, beautiful, brilliant, and currently very naked, were emerging from the sea and walking directly toward him. He couldn't move. Rowan reached him first. Without a word, she leaned down and casually snatched her panties off of his body, a wicked grin playing on her lips. Ethan blinked, stunned. This day was going to change everything. Victoria's POV. She felt the sun on her shoulders as she emerged from the water, every nerve awake, the wind brushing droplets from her bare skin. It had been Rowan's idea, bold, audacious, and yet here Victoria was, walking up the swim step without a stitch of clothing, her composure tightly wound around a threadbare center. Ethan's eyes, wide, stunned, reverent, locked onto them. For a heartbeat, she felt powerful, ridiculous, and vulnerable all at once. Then Rowan, ever the provocateur, leaned down and reclaimed her panties with theatrical grace, leaving him naked too. Victoria almost laughed. He's going to combust, she thought. But beneath the humor, something quieter stirred. This wasn't just teasing anymore. This was intimacy, measured in risk. She'd allowed herself to be seen, truly seen, not as Professor Langford or Captain Langford, but simply Victoria, a woman with salt on her skin and heat rising in her chest. And Ethan hadn't made a single lewd sound. He hadn't looked away either. He had just witnessed. She felt her stomach tighten. This couldn't go on like this forever. But right now, it was a memory being etched into the hull of their voyage. She would catalog it later, compartmentalize, manage the fallout. But for this one fragile moment, she let herself feel the charge in the air and didn't flinch from it. Rowan felt the water drip from her lashes as she walked up the swim step beside Victoria. Her pulse thrummed in her throat, not from fear but from thrill. Ethan was sitting there, dumbstruck, his eyes wide and locked like they had just delivered him a spiritual awakening. She loved that, loved the way he froze, tried so hard to be respectful, and failed so adorably. She had handed him more than a moment. She had handed him a memory, one he would never, ever forget. When she snatched her panties off of him, leaving him naked too, she watched his jaw clench and eyes flick downward, just once. No gawking, no groaning, just reverence and admiration. She didn't feel embarrassed. She felt alive, powerful. Maybe it was reckless. Maybe they were crossing lines Victoria would later redraw with military precision. But right now, it felt right. It felt like trust and balance and electricity all wrapped in salt and sunlight. And Ethan, he looked like a man who had just touched the divine. Rowan grinned. "He's gonna be insufferable for the rest of the day," she whispered under her breath. And she loved that too. Ethan's POV. His heart was pounding so hard it echoed in his ears. He'd seen a lot today, life and near death, chaos and calm, but nothing prepared him for this moment. Victoria and Rowan, unguarded and unapologetically bare, stepping out of the sea like something ancient and holy. Something he should have looked away from but couldn't. They weren't being cruel. They weren't flaunting. They were just being real. And for some reason, they had trusted him enough to let him see them that way. Rowan's playful snatch of her underwear off of his body had shocked him out of his trance. But now, sitting naked on the warm deck, Ethan felt more than embarrassment. He felt honored, moved. He would never forget this moment, not because of the nudity, but because of what it represented. Trust, camaraderie, something intimate but untouchable. He wouldn't tell anyone, wouldn't brag, but he'd carry this with him, right next to the day they saved a life. He picked up the deck brush again, hands steady, heart pounding. This voyage had stopped being about academic credits a long time ago. Victoria called them all below. She hadn't gotten dressed yet. The sunlight filtering through the portholes danced across her bare skin, but her voice carried authority unmarred by modesty. "We probably shouldn't have done this," she said. "But we are adults. Rowan, tell me, and Ethan, what you see right now. True confessions. Right now, truth. Only the truth." Rowan looked directly at Victoria, her voice steady. "I see 3 people who trust each other more than we probably should. I see you, Victoria, not just as our captain, but as a woman brave enough to step down from the podium and into the moment with us. I see Ethan, who didn't gawk or flinch, even when any other guy would have panicked or bragged. And I see myself, more exposed than I expected to be, in every sense, but I don't regret it." She glanced at Ethan, then back to Victoria. "I see strength in all of us, maybe too much closeness, but also, maybe that's what makes this voyage different, what makes it matter." Victoria nodded slowly, then turned her eyes to Ethan. Her voice was quiet but absolute. "Ethan, same question." Ethan hesitated. The words caught for just a second, tangled between awe and honesty. "I see the 2 of you, and I don't know how to put it into words without sounding like some starstruck kid." He took a breath. "But I'll try. I see courage, the kind that comes from trust, not just in each other, but in me. You both let me see you, not just your bodies, but the comfort, the strength, the ease with which you owned that moment. And I didn't know how much I needed to witness that." His eyes flicked toward Rowan, then back to Victoria. "I see what it means to be allowed into someone's orbit, and I feel lucky, undeserving, maybe, but lucky." He swallowed, then added, "And I see the line. I know it's there, even if I don't always know where exactly it is, but I'll spend every day trying to honor it." Rowan looked at Victoria with a quiet, wry smile. "And what about you, Captain? What do you see right now?" "Only truth." Ethan nodded, still catching his breath. "Yeah, we've all shared. It's your turn now." Victoria met their eyes, one at a time. Her expression was unreadable at first, then softened. "I see 2 students who stop being students the moment they choose honesty over comfort. I see a woman who spent years controlling every variable, standing here, uncertain of what comes next." She let the silence stretch. "I see that I've crossed a line I never intended to, and yet I don't feel regret. I feel the weight of it, yes, but I also feel trust from both of you, and that means more to me than I expected." Her voice lowered. "I see a team, a strange one, unorthodox, maybe even reckless, but capable, and for the first time in years, I see myself, not just as a leader, but as a participant." She stepped back from the table. "That's the truth." Victoria took one long breath, then her tone shifted as she reasserted her command presence. "All right, we need to get back to the cruise. Get dressed. But before you do, understand something. Both of you are the most beautiful people I've met. You are pretty and handsome, and I'm glad we've had this time together." She met each of their eyes in turn. "We'll eat lunch. Ethan, you'll prepare it. Then we'll set sail for the Bahamas. We'll anchor at nightfall, reach the marina tomorrow. After that, we will have a long talk." She raised an eyebrow. "Also, look longingly at each other now, strut your stuff, and then get dressed. This cannot happen again, and none of us will be swapping spit in the shower. Understand?" Both Ethan and Rowan nodded, grinning sheepishly. "Oh, and Ethan," she added as she turned toward the galley, "bed at 1800 tonight. That should give you plenty of time to get your thoughts right." Scene 9, and truth. They arrived at the marina under a muted sky. The sea had calmed, but none of them felt its serenity. Their bellies were empty, but nerves had replaced hunger. Victoria stepped into the main cabin, hands steady on the back of a chair. She took a long breath before speaking. "This is kind of the end of the first part of the voyage," she began. Yesterday's activities have changed what we can do. She scanned their faces, both expectant and guarded. First of all, I want you to know that I will feel more comfortable taking the yacht to a Florida or South Carolina marina. I know we have 3 more months scheduled, but after yesterday, we should all have chaperones. Ergo, we will tie up ashore. We can't do what we did if we're tied up at a marina. She sat down now, folding her hands on the table. Now let me tell you a story. Last year, I sold my company and retired. I bought this boat and traveled the Great Lakes for the summer. I had a blast, and I decided this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Her voice softened. But I was lonely, terribly lonely. Seeing some very beautiful scenes alone is not my idea of fun, so while I was providing you with isolation and study, I was also testing who I wanted to share the bigger cruise with. She paused. I figured the students who survived the 4 months would be offered the opportunity to extend the experience, join me on a winter cruise south of the equator. Victoria glanced toward the window, then back at them. So, here's what's changed and what hasn't. The stipend is still in place, same amount per month. The difference is, we'll stay tied to shore for the majority of the time. We'll sail on some weekends, but blue water sailing, as it sits right now, would be a catastrophic mistake. She held their eyes. Except for the scenery, nothing is different. That's what hasn't changed. What has changed is my decision of finalist students. After this last week, you both are winners as far as I'm concerned. I'd love to have you join me for a longer cruise. She sat back slightly, letting her words settle. Again, that won't happen until after the 4-month agreement. But I want to be clear about it. Does this make sense, the way I'm explaining it? Rowan folded her arms lightly, not in defiance but in thought. Yes, ma'am, it makes sense. I appreciate the clarity and the honesty. She paused, searching for the right words. I admit, I wasn't expecting this to turn into something so emotionally immersive, but I don't see anything broken here. I see 3 people navigating uncharted waters, not just literally, but emotionally, too. Rowan's voice was steady, but her eyes flicked toward the window. Tying up to shore makes sense. It gives us all breathing room. I'm still in, if you'll have me. I want to keep learning. I want to earn that longer cruise. She looked directly at Victoria. And I'll follow your lead, even when it stings. Victoria choked back tears, visibly moved by Rowan's words. She nodded once, then turned to Ethan. Ethan, what do you think? Ethan drew in a slow breath, fingers laced in front of him on the table. I think you're right, ma'am, about everything. We've crossed lines that can't be uncrossed, but I don't feel shame about it, just awareness. I understand now what this voyage is really about. Not just academics, not even just leadership. It's about learning how to exist together, with trust, boundaries, and accountability. He glanced over at Rowan, then back at Victoria. I'm still in, for the rest of the 4 months. For the longer cruise, if you'll still have me, and I'll earn that place the right way. He gave a small smile. Even if it means scrubbing decks in my underwear again, or going to bed at 1800 for the next month. He added, quieter, thank you for trusting us enough to keep us here. Victoria leaned forward again, her eyes shimmering. First, let me correct you. Both of you asked, if you'll have me. I will have either or both. We'll have to figure out the stateroom and crew quarters situation, but I'd be honored if you joined me for the longer cruise. She looked between them with warmth. Secondly, if you need to go back to college to finish your studies, we will wait for you, or come back for you when you're done. She paused, then continued with more gravity. Thirdly, full-time cruising may not fit into your long-term plans, and that's okay. Let's talk about it. I want to know what you need from me. She exhaled slowly, then added with a wry smile, another thing that will have to change is the captain versus crew dynamic. I'm pretty sure you all don't want to be ordered around or sent to bed at 2,000 hours. Rowan looked at her and said, Don't be so sure that I want that dynamic to change. Ethan agreed, saying, I'll be honest, I think that being subordinate to you fits my longer-term goals. I like following you more than I ever thought I would.